Jim come in? No, that's from Councillor Adams. Hi everyone. Just to let you know, we don't have any questions for our public forum tonight. We haven't received any. So given that we're all here and we're being taped, we can start the meeting if we're all in agreement. Yep, nobody's opposing. Good. With that, I'll just council meeting live here. Can I just remind everybody that this council meeting is being recorded and will be published online via Facebook. To those present in the meeting today, by participating in this public meeting, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. The Mayor and the General Manager have the authority to pause the recording if comments or debate are considered defamatory or otherwise inappropriate for publishing. Participants are advised that they may be subject to legal action if they engage in unlawful behaviour or commentary. With that, I'll open the meeting at this time and welcome everybody here. Our meeting is being recorded, as we said. There is no apologies. Can I ask Councillor Adams to say the prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to invoke your blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement and true welfare of the people of the council area, our state and Australia. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Gallagher, are you able to do the acknowledgement of country?
Yes, so I acknowledge the traditional owners upon the land upon which we meet and pay our respect to those elders, both past, present and emerging.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. We'll move now to the minutes for confirmation for the ordinary meeting of April 29th, 2020. Do I have a mover? Yes, Councillor Kennedy's moving. Seconder, Councillor Clark. Thank you. You want to clear count the hands?
I think Tom may have had a question.
Oh, did you have a question, Councillor Kennedy?
Yes, I'll move an amendment to the minutes. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
What page, Councillor?
So on page 3, when it says apologies, moved Councillor Adams, seconded Councillor Clark. All that was moved on that night was that the apology submitted by Councillor Gallagher was accepted.
Sorry, could you turn off your phone, please, Councillor Kennedy? There's that letter from... Yeah, I know. Did we just have that phone? Okay. So you're moving an amendment. Is there a seconder for your amendment? Councillor...
Yes, I'll second it.
Allgate, So what is your amendment? Your amendment is the meeting minutes except for page 3, the apologies. Is that right, Councillor Kennedy?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Okay, do you want to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you. What was moved at the meeting was that an apology be given to Councillor Gallagher. There was no mention at the meeting of a leave of absence. It may be written in later in the minutes. What was said at that meeting was, in fact, that the Mayor actually said she'd received word from Councillor Gallagher, who was in Dubbo at the time, that he'd be putting in an apology and he'd attempt to make it to the meeting. If he arrived back, he would probably be late, but he said if he arrived in time, he would come to the meeting. There was no talk of a leave of absence. There was no leave of absence moved by either by either one of those councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Just as everybody knows, before I go to any speakers against the amendment, we did receive clarification as I requested from the Office of Local Government, and it was in response to my email seeking the recent council meeting. And as it said in the letter, Section 234 of the Local Government Act provides that a councillor's civic office will become vacant if they're absent at 3 meetings. The minutes of the Broken Hill City Council ordinary meeting on the 26th of February and the 25th of March show that both meetings council resolved to accept Councillor Gallagher's apology and granted him leave of absence. The Office of Local Government understands from you that the same occurred at the ordinary meeting on the 29th. The Office of Local understands from you that it's council's usual practice to grant a leave of absence in response to an apology, and a review of the confirmed minutes of the council meeting date back to 2018 confirms this is the case. The fact that the council granted Councillor Gallagher a leave of absence in response to his apology is immaterial for the purpose of Section 234, and the fact that the leave of absence had been granted on each occasion Councillor Gallagher was absent means that he continues to occupy council's civic office. Is there any other? Did Councillor Kennedy speak against it? He spoke for it. Is any speakers against the amendment? Yeah, the amendment? No speakers against the amendment. I'll put Councillor Kennedy's amendment with a foreshadowed motion from the Deputy Mayor for the minutes. Sorry, we already have Councillor Kennedy and Clark's foreshadowed motion, sorry. So I'll put Councillor Kennedy's amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Don't forget to vote, Councillor.
Yeah. I'm not in favour of his amendment.
Okay, all those against? Green button.
Who was for? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Councillors Allgate and Kennedy for.
So just to read it out, Councillor
Hang on.
Kennedy on Allgate 4. Councillor, and I'll just read down the list.
Which is the red, which is
That's it.
against.
Yeah, at
Got the
one
wrong one.
stage, yeah. Councillor Allgate is for the amendment. Councillor LaCour, Councillor Adams, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark is against it. Councillor Page, you haven't voted.
Against.
Is that against, Councillor?
Screen doesn't show a voting setup, so I'll just vote with the hand each time.
Well, we'll have to come to you to hear it verbally each time. Just look at your participants list. So you're voting for or against?
Against.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Dave is he declaring a conflict of interest and moving out? No, okay. Thank you, councillors. That amendment's lost. We'll now move to Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Clark's motion for the minutes about the amendment. Sorry, Councillor Adams and Councillor Clark's. Sorry.
Oh, the initial.
Yeah, the initial one. Oh, Councillor, did you asking a question? Councillor Kennedy? Sorry, we're just not unmuted yet. You're still not unmuted, is it?
No, I'm speaking against the minutes.
Okay, can
The
you,
reality is,
I'll just check to see if Councillor Adams would like to speak for the minutes first. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak for the minutes?
Well, I just believe that they're true account, and the situation that Councillor Kennedy's talking about has been clarified very clearly by the Office of Local Government and sent out, and you sent out that letter to us several weeks ago. So I believe that the minutes stand as they are.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, you're speaking against.
yes, I'm speaking against. It isn't what happened at the meeting. It might be fine for the local Office of Local Government, and I have no problem with that, to say that a leave of absence was granted or whatever they want to say. The reality is it wasn't said during that meeting. Council can write it in the minutes later but it did not happen at that meeting. What happened at that meeting, and there is transcribed, they've been transcribed by different people. There's no mention at those previous meetings, but regardless of what happened at those previous meetings, we are talking about this meeting. The Office of Local Government did not give a recommendation to this meeting. It gave a recommendation about past meetings that was the practice. Just because council does things wrong once doesn't mean we continue to do that. What was said at that meeting was that they moved an apology. There was no mention of a leave of absence. Council's now trying to recreate something that didn't happen. You can't use the minutes to fix what happened at a meeting. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, councillor. With that, councillor Adams, do you want to write a reply?
No, I stand by what I just said.
Thank you.
Nothing more can be said.
Thank you. I'll put the motion, the minutes, all those in favour. So we have Councillor Branco, Councillor Adams, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark, Councillor Page, Mayor Shirley in favour, and Councillor Kennedy against. Yeah, Councillor, oh there you go, Councillor Allgate just voted. And Councillor Allgate against. Declare the minutes passed. Thank you, councillors, for your patience. We'll go to disclosures of interest. I have one disclosure of interest from Councillor Cool. Shall I read it? This is for a non-pecuniary. It's on item 11 of reports number 68/20, and it's close relative to an application mentioned in the Traffic Committee minutes. And he's going to take leave and step outside. Is there any other further disclosures of interest? If not, we'll record that. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move to the mayoral minute, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gallagher, who is the part of our economy team. Our leadership team. So this is, councillors, you will see that this is an updated version of our advocacy strategy. It has two new sections in this. One is around renewables. Renewable Energy Action Plan. The second one is around the social housing. It also has incorporated the new graphics, and certainly, and the wording has been amended slightly. There is no great change from the vision that this council has and the future that this council is setting for making sure that we advocate for funding. Is there speakers against the motion? Councillor Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just have a number of questions that can be answered at the next meeting. On page 43 of the business paper, there is mention of carbon footprint and reduced carbon emissions by becoming an increased livable city. Could we just for the next meeting have what actual percentage of carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere and what percentage of that carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere is made by humans activity, and of that percentage that is made by humans, what impact could Broken Hill City Council have on reducing that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere?
Next question.
Yeah, the questions
sorry,
they can
just
be
slow
answered.
down a minute, Lisa. To reduce, what was that? What action will council take to reduce our carbon footprint?
By humans, what action will council, the action that council take, what effect will it have on the reduced carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Percentage wise.
Your next question, councillor.
No, I'll just speak against it. I'll try and keep it fairly brief.
Thanks.
On page 36, it speaks about, again, the precinct and spending $20 to $25 million, making it a hub of the city. What has concerned me even more about this is there's been recent talk about Audi coming to Broken Hill, and that may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on which person you speak to. But what impact that will have on the city is if it's built away from the local precinct, where council plans to spend $20 or $25 million building a library, it will most definitely take more shops out of that precinct. There's no way council will be able to make Argent Street a hub. I'm all for Argent Street being the main centre of activity in Broken Hill. There's no point in council spending tens of millions of dollars on a library at the same time talking about supermarkets in other areas of the town, particularly out of Argent Street. So the document, in my opinion, has a lot of fluff, but not much substance. So thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Is there any speakers for the advocacy strategy? No? Okay, thank you, councillors. This strategy is certainly one of setting us above the rest. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to commend the strategy. I think it's very comprehensive. I was going to make a note about in the housing strategy section, but I think that has actually been covered. My concern is that we look to the need for more social housing, community housing, and I'm speaking from the perspective of my membership of the lead program steering committee, where one of the main issues there is the lack of decent, affordable community social housing. But I think that is actually covered there. But I think it's a very comprehensive, and it's an advocacy strategy, and it's kind of multi-purpose as far as I can see. I know to date I've been at, as we all have, numerous meetings with visiting ministers and people with influence, and that's a really useful document to be able to hand. It's a really good summary, and I do commend the additions. I think and I'd have to speak here against Councillor Kennedy, is obviously not in favour of the renewable energy thrust of the additions to this. I think there's a great potential for that for all sorts of reasons. So I commend the document.
Thank you, councillor. No speakers against. Okay, I think as Councillor Brown said, this is a submission package that we take to government to show our vision. This is a package that we show what is our priorities for our whole community. And certainly when you look at all the strategies that's included there, we have a vision that we need to share. So thank you for that. I'll put the mayoral minute. All those in favour? Councillor Allgate, are you voting? Thank you. So the vote is Councillor Allgate and Councillor Kennedy against, Councillor LeCour, Councillor Adams, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark, Councillor Page and Mayor Shirley for. Thank you, that's carried. We now move, the notices of motion is in confidential, so we'll wait to get to them. Item 9 is notices of rescission, for which there is none. Item 10 is reports from delegates, for which there is none. So we'll move to reports. The first item is report number 58/20, page 49, the correspondence regarding Trainlink trial for the coach service to Mildura and Adelaide. Moved by Councillor Adams. Seconder? Councillor Brown. Councillor Adams, do you want to speak to that?
Well, it really doesn't tell us a great deal more than what we already know, Madam Mayor. It's not really making it sound encouraging at all. We'll just wait and see what they come up with.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately the case we're in. And so if there's no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour? I'll declare that a unanimous vote. Thank you, everyone. We'll move to item 2, report number 59/20, page 52. This is correspondence request to extension to temporary water restrictions for the Northern Murray-Darling Basin tributaries. Do I have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Nolan, second by Councillor Brown. Councillor Nolan, do you want to speak to that?
Well, just briefly, Madam Mayor. It's a difficult scenario we keep asking, and of course it was unsurprising that we got the response we did. I think that we have to accept that is the response, but not accept defeat. I think we need to look at the sustainable diversion limit and floodplain harvesting, and the fact that that's not the floodplain harvesting is not currently included. It needs to be, because it's certainly a significant amount of water that doesn't make it into the river. It's almost semantics when you separate the water that's in the river channel from the water that's flowing over the land to get to the river channel. It's really not good enough, and we need to consider a response after the final report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, speaking against the motion.
Move an amendment. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
What's your amendment, Councillor?
My,
Just go slow for Lisa.
my amendment is 1 and 2.
Yep.
And that we write to the Minister asking that
Just check, you're talking about Minister for Water? Right,
Yeah.
to the Minister for Water?
the appropriate Minister, that the 395 to 425 gigalitres forecast to go into the Menindee Lakes system remain in the Menindee Lakes system to be used for the Lower Darling and the environment of the Lower Darling and Menindee Lakes system, and for the people of the Menindee Lakes Township. And also not only write to the Minister, also Roy Butler, our local member.
You also want to include the Shadow Minister for Water?
Happy to.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Allgate. You want to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I move this amendment because it's important. The Minister has acknowledged in her correspondence that she's pleased to have 300 gigalitres of water go into the Menindee Lakes, with a forecast of around 400 gigalitres to finally go into the lakes. She described the restrictions that have been placed on northern irrigators as unprecedented. This is not true. Up until 10, 15 years ago, those flows regularly made it down the Darling River and into the Menindee Lakes. It may be unprecedented now to have those flows go in. She also talks about floodplain harvesting has never been stopped before. Floodplain harvesting was never a problem until the last 15 to 20 years, when there's been an explosion of water licenses granted, unapproved dams, unapproved pumping that goes along in the Northern Basin. So the Minister needs to understand the importance of water coming down to the Menindee Lakes. And I think that water that has finally made it there needs to be kept there and used to make sure that the Lower Darling keeps the fish alive and keeps those small property owners alive, and at the same time allows water to be in the Menindee Township, so the township can again start getting tourism and rebound from not only what has been a drought and not only what has been a time with no water in the lakes, but also the coronavirus. The Menindee Township needs water in the Menindee Lakes more than ever, and it needs to be explained in that correspondence just how important that water is to the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to ask Councillor. Oh, we'll move it along. Good position, Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. I'll put this. If there's any speakers against, Councillor LaCour.
Madam Mayor, I'm wondering if Councillor Kennedy would consider an amendment or change to that serial 3, and that we actually try to arrange a meeting with the ministers and local member. A face-to-face meeting, I think, is probably warranted at this point. Otherwise, we're just going to get these letters going back and forwards, and they're not going to go anywhere. I think as soon as we can, whether it's video conferencing or not, that we arrange a face-to-face meeting. I think that'll be more forceful, make more of an impact than just another letter. So I'm just asking Councillor Kennedy if he'd consider changing that, number 3.
To meet with the minister, to request a meeting.
Yep.
Is that right? To request a meeting. Councillor Kennedy, are you happy to?
Happy to add that to it for sure.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Good work together, councillors. If there's no speakers against, I'll put that amendment. All those in favour? Okay. All those against? Councillor Gallagher, you haven't voted yet. Oh, you're abstaining. Oh, yes. So it's unanimous vote. Thank you, everyone. It's unanimous vote. That amendment now becomes the motion. I'll put the motion. Councillor, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Another unanimous vote. We'll move to item 3, report number 60/20, page 54, correspondence report, New South Wales Government stimulus package for local government sector. Do I have a mover by Councillor Brown? Seconded by Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Brown, do you want to speak to the correspondence? We'll just
yes, yeah, I think I'm unmuted now. Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, it's pretty much a predictable response, but I believe that we need to highlight to both state and federal governments the reality of what the various stimulus packages have meant for this council. I mean, it's good that we've got something, but it's not particularly appropriate for our situation. So I would like that as a sort of minimal response, I suppose, to write to the local member, our local state member, and our I suppose in a way I'm speaking to the second item as well, but our local, state and federal members, bearing in mind that our federal member is the the Federal Minister for Local Government, just the reality of the impact of COVID-19 on this local government area.
Thank you, good point. So it'll be 1, 2 and 3 and 4 as moved and seconded by Councillor Gallagher. Any speakers against? Councillor Clark?
No.
No?
I have my hand up to second the motion.
Oh, okay, Councillor Gallagher got in quicker. Thank you. If there's no speakers, Councillor Kennedy, you want to speak against?
I can't see what number 4 is.
That council writes to the local, state and federal member, highlighting the reality of the impact of COVID-19 on the local government area. Oh, sorry, you're just muted for a second. We'll just, can you see it now?
Yeah, see, I can see it now. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, you're not speaking against?
No.
Okay, well, if there's no speakers against, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 4, correspondence report, federal page, report number 61/20, page 57, correspondence report, federal government support of the local government sector. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Brown. And a seconder, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brown, do you want to add anything to that motion?
No, Madam Mayor, I think the first motion covers this really.
Okay, thank you. If there's any speakers against? No speakers against. I'll put the vote, all those in favour. Declare to carry unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move to report number 62/20, the draft delivery program, page 61. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Brown, moved by Councillor Brown. Seconder, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brown, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a third point there, a third recommendation there, which is really only applies to the present time, you know, when we're under COVID restrictions. But my amendment is that a report on proposed opening hours for council facilities be presented monthly rather than quarterly until COVID restrictions are lifted.
That a report on
Proposed opening hours
be reported monthly.
for council facilities
Yeah.
be presented monthly rather than quarterly until COVID restrictions are lifted.
I've just got, I've got a seconder. I have Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Allgate to speak, and then Councillor Adams. So I'll just put a number down if you don't mind. Give me a second. Councillor Kennedy, you're speaking against it.
Did you want Councillor to speak?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, just briefly, Madam Mayor. This is obviously a temporary clause to add to this fairly comprehensive report, but opening hours is a subject of great community interest at the moment, and you know, some community concern. And from a council law perspective, I think it's important that we have a part in this process of coming out of lockdown. Obviously, it will only apply until we move out of this phase.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, you're speaking against?
Yes, I'll move an amendment, thanks.
What's your amendment, councillor?
My amendment is 1, 2 and 3 as written. I've no problem with 3. And at number 4, that within the budget or within the draft delivery program and operational plans, that the mechanism for borrowing the $10 million loan be removed, and that a detailed report be prepared for council June meeting explaining the future impacts that the borrowing of 10 million for infrastructure will have on future councils, and with them having to pay back 2 million in principal per year and 370,000 in interest. Oh no, that can't be right. 37,000 in interest, I think. 1.85%, I think it's 37,000 in interest per year. What will that mean with their ability to carry out capital projects over their terms of council?
Have I got a seconder? Councillor Olga, are you seconding that?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Just checking. I'll just see if there's Councillor Kennedy, you want to speak to your amendment, and then I'll go to Councillor Page.
Yes, I do want to speak to that. As councillors would be aware, we borrowed 10 million before to what was to be used to increase infrastructure, do infrastructure works. That $10 million was borrowed only less than a couple of years ago. At the time, we could have borrowed 20, 30, $40 million. There was no impost on what we could borrow. We borrowed that money for a purpose. That purpose still remains. To borrow another 10 million on top of that, I think puts an impost on future councils and the future communities who will be dealing with, in reality, $2 million less per year in their budget. There may be less for them to have to do as far as some of the works that would have been done with infrastructure are able to be done. But a good percentage of that money we're talking about, I'd assume, would be going to the library. Money would be going elsewhere. Councils should not indebt other councils, future councils, and make it almost impossible for them to operate. Any council in the future is going to find it very difficult to operate with $2 million less in what they have to spend, because that $2 million that they would be able to spend on infrastructure, including roads, including ovals, parks, gardens, footpaths, councils will have $2 million less to be able to spend because this council has decided or will decide to borrow $10 million to spend now and have future councils pay it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Page, I just have a question from councillor Adams. Did you had a question?
No, am I unmuted?
You're muted, yes.
I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted.
Okay. No, it's all right. I did remove my my question because it was purely on the number 3 with Councillor Brown was talking about, and I was thinking that we as councillors are kept up to date every single day pretty well from the report of openings and so on through from councillor from the GM. But I realised now she was talking more about a report for the whole community.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Just give us a second while it become unmute. You're speaking against the motion, the amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor.
The reason that I speak against it, I would agree we shouldn't be borrowing money unless it's an opportunity to make money. So what I'm proposing that the council look at is that we have a joint business-ship with Central Darling, Wentworth and Broken Hill City Council. The millions of dollars that are spent on road works and other maintenance, we should have a business plan put in place so that money is spent locally in those 3 locations. So it's cheap, affordable money now to make the move to start up a joint venture. So the money that's spent on roads is not a small amount of money, it's a huge amount of money. And I think we should be looking to borrow the money to make money. And I agree with Councillor Kennedy. We can't just keep borrowing money and then have a huge debt hanging over our heads. So we need to look at opportunities. If we do borrow the money, it's a time now to borrow. Let's look at possibly making money and creating jobs in our 3 locations. So let's have a look at these sort of proposals. This is only one of many, but let's borrow the money and let's do something to make a future for employment and create an income for the outback region, Madam Mayor. And I'd like everyone to have a good think about it because the money's there, it's affordable money and the projects are there.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Councillor Allgate, speaking for the amendment.
Yeah, I speak for the amendment, but I had some questions as well, Madam Mayor. But I understand from where Councillor Page is coming from, but like Councillor Kennedy, I don't think it's the right time to be embarking on a second $10 million loan in these uncertain times. We've already seen our investment return drop substantially, and there's no guarantee that that's going to return to pre-COVID-19 levels. It may well, but that's to be proven yet. To have the need for the council to pay $2 million back on the loan in principle every year for 10 years is a fairly significant impost. I know the loan is cheap, and perhaps because it's cheap we should be borrowing it. I think we've already experienced the first $10 million loan that was going to make us money that hasn't, and I'm sort of very reluctant to be putting my hand up to have the community borrow another 10 million. I mean, you've got to remember that, as I mentioned the other night in the briefing, we're talking about a budget deficit, an operating deficit of $7 million. You know, a business that's running its operational side of the business at a $7 million loss is not in a good position. And irrespective of what people say, to put another $10 million on that impost over 10 years is something significant. But I did want to ask a couple of questions on the long-term financial estimates.
Yes, Councillor.
Can I go now?
Yes, yes. For your...
Right, on page 81, sorry. On page 81, with the user fees and charges, it's shown for the actuals for 2019 at $11.1 million. And then it drops down to 4 million the following year, and 2.6 million the next year, and then back up to 4. Is the $11 million for the current or for the 2019 period, is that high because of the $6.5 million that the Pipeline Authority paid in?
Mr. Nankerville, I'll just unmute you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, that's correct. That's the increase is due to the pipeline works.
Right. Now, the second thing, sorry?
Next question, councillor.
The second thing is that with the grants and contributions for capital works, you know, we've gone from 2.8 million to 4.2 million up to in 2021 up to 30 million. Am I assuming that we're expecting to get $3 for every one that we have in terms of grants?
Mr. Nankerville.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't think $3 for every $1, but definitely in the papers we've put in there that expected yet unconfirmed capital grants for the project. So you'll notice in the future-proof scenario, we've listed the key economic stimulus projects there that we would be looking to use the loan funds for, plus grant money for. So taking that into account, that's how that's been built up, plus the grant money for the cultural and library precinct. So that's where the $30 million comes for. It's put in there as expected yet unconfirmed, but we need to put it in the budget, otherwise we can't put the expenditure in there for the capital projects.
Yeah, but it's a pretty wild expectation, though, isn't it, to get an extra $26 million in grants?
Well, not during the current climate, I wouldn't have thought so. And given that we're budgeting for the purpose of being able to obtain these projects for capital works, it wouldn't be unexpected if we were successful for those grants.
No, okay. I think it's a bit outlandish. I think it's pie in the sky, personally, but that's just my thoughts.
Do you have any other questions, Councillor Allgate?
No, no more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, you're speaking against the amendment?
Look, I'm just commenting on some of the points that have been raised already. You know, about the timing of asking for a loan. Actually, with these very low interest rates, which are not going to last for much longer, or certainly won't last very long at all, it is probably one of the best times if a council was going to get a loan. These are being promoted by the state government, which is encouraging councils to apply for loans so that they can undertake infrastructure projects, something which is an important aim of the state government. And I'd also, somebody can answer this, I would assume, isn't the purpose of getting the loan, from my reading in this document, to allow council to access government grants so that it can develop capital works that are going to aid employment, improve the economy, and give our community some infrastructure projects to improve the facilities for ratepayers. And that's something that ratepayers have been asking for constantly.
Thank you,
Might be a
Councillor.
few questions there.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
That's correct, Councillor. And if you look at the first scenario, the projects, the major projects there are exactly what you're articulating, Councillor, including the development of the O'Neill Park Sports Precinct and the Queen Elizabeth Park. So thank you for that. No more speakers for the amendment? If not, I'll go to, this is an amendment. So I'll put Councillor Kennedy's amendment. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, so we have Councillor Allgate and Councillor Kennedy supporting the amendment, Councillor and Councillor Page supporting the amendment. We have Councillor LaCour, Councillor Adams, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark against the amendment. So the amendment's lost. We'll now move to the motion, the Councillor Brown's motion. Councillor Brown, would you like a right of reply?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Just to address a couple of the issues raised by Councillor Kennedy in supporting this motion, the report shows the 3 different scenarios. You know, the scenario where we borrow the 10 million, where we don't, and the other 2 when we don't, and both of those make it clear that our financial position, I mean, it certainly makes some assumptions, and you know, who knows what the future holds, but those scenarios make clear that at the end of the reporting period, our financial position and the year in which we break even are best with the scenario where we borrow the $10 million, which after all is a economic stimulus package. It's not as if we're borrowing, you know, 10 million from the market somewhere. This is endorsed by the government. The T Corp proposal, it's extremely low interest, and it does address the issue of intergenerational debt, which Councillor Kennedy raised. It actually shifts the rate burden much more evenly between the generations. So my personal position is that in view of our responsibility to the community, the need for economic renewal, then this is by far the best option.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, you had a question?
No, Madam Mayor, you didn't allow any speakers against the motion. I had my hand up before you put the right of reply to Councillor Brown. There has been no speakers against the motion. I wish to speak against the motion, and you didn't give me the opportunity to speak.
Oh.
As we're at this video conference and we expect to be able to act like a normal council meeting, Councillor Brown moved a motion, I moved an amendment.
That's okay, Councillor. I think we will accommodate, of course we will accommodate you. Speak against the motion, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll speak against the motion because this thing about the interest rates are not going to remain low for very long and all this sort of stuff. The interest rates are at record lows before the coronavirus. The reality is interest rates are going to stay low for a long, long time to come. If we are lucky enough to get grants, we certainly don't have to have the money in advance to get those grants. We apply for the grants, then we get the loans. That's the way it should work. That's the way normal businesses work. That's the way councils should work. Councils borrowing money in advance. If we don't get those grants, what will happen, and we know, as has happened before, that money will be spent, it'll be chewed up, we won't end up getting anything right that's put in the long-term financial draft or the operational plan. This is why you have a project first, then you borrow the money. If we want to do the O'Neill Oval or the Queen Elizabeth Park, we apply for grants. We can apply for as many grants as we like, and if we get them, we then borrow the money to take care of them. The reality is, it is not the interest rates are not going up. There's going to be no rush to get this money. This is the same interest rates we're looking at 2 years ago when we come to T Corp. It's fine for T Corp to say you need to borrow money to boost the economy and all this sort of stuff. The reality is people need to pay it back, and the community will have to pay it back. And if we don't get those grants that we're looking at, 30 million this coming financial year and 13 million the financial year after that, if that doesn't happen, like 10 million will be chewed up in operational money as it has been before, and the community will get nothing out of it, and they'll be paying back $2 million per year for 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be fair, because Councillor Brown hadn't heard your argument before her right of reply, I'll just see if Councillor Brown would like to have anything else added to her right of reply. Oh my goodness. Councillor Clark, have you got a question? Or you want to speak? You're going to speak.
I would like to clarify something there. Councillor Kennedy mentioned that the money would be chewed up in operational matters. Now, I'm under the impression that it can only be used for capital works. Isn't that correct?
Mr.
That's its purpose. For capital works.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's correct?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct. Thank you. Councillor Brown, given that you hadn't heard all the arguments before your right of reply, would you like to add anything further before we put the motion?
Sorry, I was having a bit of trouble unmuting myself. No, I don't think so, Madam Mayor. I don't agree with what Councillor Kennedy said, but I'd just be restating what I said before.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put Councillor Brown and Councillor Clark's motion. All those in favour? That's Councillor LeCour, Councillor Adams, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark, and Councillor Page. You haven't voted. Do you want to take his microphone so we can find out what he's doing? Councillor, oh, there you go. Where is Councillor Page?
Still hasn't.
Councillor Page, where are you voting?
Madam Mayor, you've only put the for, you haven't put the against yet. I'm voting against it.
Okay, that's okay. Voting against? Yeah, are you voting against? You've got to press. Okay. So I'll do this again. Those voting for, Councillor Clark, Councillor Brown, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Adams, Councillor LeCour and Councillor Page. Those voting against are Councillor Allgate and Councillor Kennedy, and Mayor Chell is voting for. Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried.
Madam Mayor.
That means that the Councillor Page.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, I'm saying yes, councillor. Speak.
I voted against the motion, and I tried to explain that on a few occasions, but you're not listening.
No, because you ticked green. You ticked the green button.
Oh, my apology.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, councillor. Were you apologising?
I very much apologise, and I'd like my vote recorded against the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. That's okay. Green is for yes, red is for no. Okay, councillor, we'll move on.
Madam Mayor,
oh, sorry.
Just remind everyone, don't unmute yourselves.
Yeah.
I'll unmute you.
Yeah.
First.
So just to remind everybody, don't unmute yourselves. We'll unmute you from this end. And can I just also say this now means that our plans will go out for public consultation for 28 days, and that they also will be presented to the Audit and Risk Committee on Friday. For any councillors that want to observe that committee meeting, they may want to organise that with the General Manager. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move to report number 63/20, the draft long-term financial plan. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Noland, moved by Councillor Noland, second by Councillor Brown. Councillor Noland, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Noland?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of the discussion we've just had relates exactly to that. We've got choices. We could tighten our belt, lose jobs, cut services, and do what Portugal, Greece, Italy, etc. did after the GFC, or we can get on with building Broken Hill for the future. As painful as that is, it's what we have to do, and that's our long term. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Is there any speakers against? Councillor Brown, did you want to make a question? Do you have a question?
No. Sorry, my hand's up, but it shouldn't be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Green is for yes, red is for no. All those against? So all those in favour, Councillor Nolan, you haven't voted yet. Thank you. So Councillor Allgate and Councillor Kennedy are against. Councillor McCool, Councillor Adams, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark and Councillor Page support the motion. The motion is carried. We'll move to item 7, report number 64/20, page 209. This is the draft Broken Hill Regional Art Gallery. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Brown, second by Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown, do you want to speak to this? Or just unmute you?
Yes. Yep. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just one section of that I have some concerns, and it was something that was raised when we discussed this at great length, as I recall before. I'm referring to section 11.3 on page 223, and it's the deaccessioning section, and the draft says that no council employee may receive deaccession materials, and I am moving that it be expanded somewhat to read, no individual who's an employee of council or a family member or a member of the Art Gallery Advisory Committee or family member may receive deaccession materials. So it's adding the word employee of council or a family member or a member of the Art Gallery Advisory Committee or family member may receive.
This will go in the draft document. Councillor Adams, are you happy with that?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Adams is happy with that. So should that include elected councillors as well, Councillor Brown?
Yes.
Yes. So we'll put.
We go with them running off with a pro heart or two.
Yep. So or elected members. Okay, Councillor Adams, again, you're happy with that? Great, thank you. Speakers against, I'll go to Councillor Kennedy first. Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown, do you want to speak to the motion?
No, I think it just, this has taken us such a lot of time to get to this point, and it was something that we discussed before. So I'm hopeful that this will just clarify it and sort of secure it a bit.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, we'll just unmute you. You're speaking against. Don't unmute yourself, just let us unmute you.
No, it comes up, mine comes up on the screen after James pushes it, I think. No, I'm not speaking against. I'd just like to thank the staff that were involved. They went through and fixed a lot of those issues that we had at the original meeting, and I thank them for the time they took to make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Clark, the chair of the Regional Art Gallery Committee.
Yes, I'm just asking, are you requiring this now to go back to the Regional Art Gallery Advisory Committee for consideration and voting before it then comes back to a further council meeting?
No, the art gallery advises the council, so this will now go out to the public for 28 days.
You did take the other amendments that were asked to the policy, for the policy. You did send them back to be included.
That was to be included because there wasn't the dear session, I can't say that tonight, section in there. They needed clarity.
So
Councillor,
what are you asking this, what are you doing with this then? This will just
this-
go to the
this
council,
section
will it?
is just saying, under section 3 where it says, I'll just go to that and just remind me what page.
223.
73.
223.
223. I got it. Yes, I have. And it's section 11. And so where it says, at the moment, it says all records of DS, section 11.3.
It's just before 11.4, the sentence before 11.4.
Okay, no individual, so at the moment, councillors, it says no individual who is an employee of council may receive DS-sessioned material from the collection. And what councillor Brown has included is is adding that further, no individual who is an employee of council or an employee family member or a member of the Art Gallery Advisory Committee or a member of the elected members of council shall receive any deaccessioned items.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. I am aware of what the amendment is. I'm asking, where does it go from here? Because the previous amendments that were made by the gallery manager, who then represented them to council. What is council going to do with this?
So, and I'll seek the general manager's advice, but we are now looking that it goes to the public for 28 days consultation. And then it will come back to council probably by July.
Yes, Madam Mayor, item number 3, recommendation number 3 says just that council now publicly exhibits the draft regional art gallery exhibition policy for a period of 28 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, if there's no further debate, Councillor Brown, do you want to write a reply?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is a unanimous vote. Thank you, councillors. That will now go out on public exhibition for comment. We move now to item 8, page report number 65/20, page 226, the quarterly budget review for the period ending March 2020. And I think as councillors have already raised concerns, we've had this report about our deficit. Do I have a mover for the motion? Mover. Moved by Councillor Gallagher, second by Councillor Adams. Press the green button, Councillor. So I'll just move that, Councillor Gallagher, second by Councillor Adams. Councillor Gallagher, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, although it does look a bit, we're in a deficit budget at the present stage, and the long-term plan is there. We've got good people behind us, and I believe that we'll trade out. So I'll just move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Allgate, were you speaking against the motion? Why don't we just unmute you, Councillor?
I was just going to make the comment that we've just approved a $10 million loan, and when you look at page 227, we had a reduction of basically almost $1 million in our investment returns due to the market volatility. You know, it's a concern of mine that the $10 million loan is a real concern as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Councillor, just remind you, we did not just approve it. We've actually said we're going out to public consultation for the month to look at this. So,
Could I ask a question?
yeah, what's your question, Councillor?
Could somebody remind me, also on page 227, additional legal expenses of 800,000 due to ongoing litigation that we arose during matters discussed as per Council's legal briefing. Can you just tell me what that extra $800,000 is actually for? I don't recall it, that's all.
Madam Mayor, I might just refer to CFO, Mr.
Yep,
McConnell.
Mr. Nankerville?
Yep, thanks, Madam Mayor. We'll probably can't go into too much detail, otherwise we'd prejudice the case. It is relating to the Civic Centre litigation, and it was in relation to the matters within the confidential briefings around the specifics of the case.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, have I got Councillor Allgate was speaking against? Do I have any speakers for? Do you have any
Councillor
speakers
Kennedy
for?
still wants to
Are you
speak.
speaking, you've got something, Councillor? Are you speaking for, Councillor? We're just unmuting you. Don't unmute yourself, Councillor, we'll do it for you.
Councillor Allgate didn't speak against. Councillor said he has a couple of questions, and I wish to speak against the motion.
Thank you,
Councillor Allgate at no stage said he was speaking against, and said that he had a comment and a question. Before I speak against it, I would just like a question on the 800,000. Is that $800,000 in addition to the amount that was quoted in the October 2019 report?
Mr. Nankerville?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Right.
Councillor. Okay, thank you, Mr. Nankerville.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'll speak against the motion. Like Councillor Allgate, I have real concern about the loan. We've been told about this $2 million increase in deficit from a reduction in operation costs. We finally now do get the opportunity to see a bit of a breakdown on that. There was an $815,000 reduction in revenue from user charges from the airport, art gallery, Albert Kirsten, living desert, waste facilities, etc. So it was about 815,000, or it says 815,000. There was also a 500,000 reduction in employee expenses as a result of the staff utilising excess leave. So the reality, the cost for council over the 3-month period of the coronavirus for services has been 315,000, nowhere near the $2 million that had been spoken about and put to a number of meetings, and was my concern for a long time, and I've also voiced it at a number of meetings. What has been the loss to council, and is because of our own management, and we invested in investments that could lose money, and we lost $975,000 in investments. That $975,000 we lost in investments did not have to happen if we were in safe investments. So the $975,000 is different to our operational and everything that we've been talking about, how terrifying the coronavirus and the impact it was having on our council. The other 800,000 is for legal expenses that has nothing at all to do with coronavirus. The 800,000 is an expense that was incurred solely for a thing other than the coronavirus. So even if you take the investments of 975,000 and the 315,000 difference in what we got as opposed to the savings, it still only adds up to about $1.3 million. So when council goes out to the community and tells them this, we need a little bit of honesty in what we're speaking. The reality is the increase was not solely to do with the coronavirus. 800,000 was to do with legal expenses in addition for the legal civic centre, and 975,000 was income investment that was predicted. In reality, what council did was over-predict how much they were going to get in investment revenue. They didn't even lose, council never lost that investment revenue. They just over-predicted how much we were going to get. So when you look at it, the budget that we accepted last year in July over-predicted how much we were going to get in investment revenue. And at the time, both Councillor Allgate and I said, it is silly to think that you are going to get 8 to 10% interest on investment every year on an amount of money and borrow that money and tell the community it is free money, we are going to make money out of it. The reality is, not only did we not make money out of it, it has cost the community. So let's not pretend to anyone in this community that the coronavirus affected us in any other way than $315,000 in lost revenue from the facilities we had to close. The rest of the money is of council's own doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers for the motion? If not, I'll give a pause. Councillor Gallagher, you're right to reply.
Yes, Madam Mayor, as I said, over 300,000 is from the coronavirus, and I believe that it's a lot less than most other councils would be suffering at the present stage. And other budget items that's mentioned in the report was approved by council at a council meeting. So I believe that we've been open and honest. The figures are there for everyone to view, and I move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, Councillor McCall, Councillor Adams, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Brown, Councillor Clark, Councillor Page, Mayor Shirley, for Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Allgate against. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move to the investment report. Do I have a mover for that? It's report number 66/20. Page 245. Can I have a mover for the investment report? Councillor Norman, do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams, Green. Councillor Nolan, do you want to speak to the motion?
Simply that the investment report reflects movement in the markets, and it's been very gratifying to see the market stabilising and seeing our investments start to go positive again.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Any speakers against? No speakers against. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Sorry, thank you. It's a unanimous vote. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move to item 10, report number 67/20, page 259, moved by Councillor Kennedy. Seconder, Councillor LeCour. Councillor Kennedy, you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to again thank the staff that was involved in that and the community that took advantage of that. And if the councillors would just have a quick read of that report, they'll see that many kids in Broken Hill don't actually take advantage of the New South Wales Sports voucher program, and the community is missing out on approximately $130,000 to $40,000 each time one of those vouchers are released. So we will, from our community, keep on working on that. But it is a problem in Broken Hill, the participation rate amongst the Broken Hill community. It's lacking compared to the rest of the state, and it is something as a council and to do with other bodies. I think we need to really work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any debate? No debate. I'll put, councillor, there's no right of reply. You happy with that? As there's no debate, I'll put the motion.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll move to the, we'll move councillor LaCour out to the waiting room. Okay, councillors, we have the report number 68/20, page 263. Can you move in councillor Brown? Moved by councillor Nolan and then councillor Brown. Councillor Nolan, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's always good to look through the action list to see what's happening.
No, this is the local traffic committee meeting.
I beg your pardon, I'd written item 11 against action list. I think it's probably more appropriate if Councillor Brown was to move that, being as she's on that committee, she could confidently speak to.
Okay, I'll put you as a seconder, Councillor Brown, you're the mover. Could you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, I don't think so, Madam Mayor, unless there are any questions. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you, councillor. If there's no debate, any debate? No debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declared it unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll bring councillor LaCour back in. He'll come back in and just give him a second to come back. Councillor LaCour, that motion was passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to the action list. Do I have a mover, Councillor Nolan, for the action list? Yes, Councillor Nolan. Seconder. I missed who the second was.
Councillor
Adams.
Adams.
Okay. Councillor Nolan, would you like to speak to the action list?
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's always good to go through the action list and see so many things in amber. Amber means they're in progress, we're getting on with it. Even better when we see ones in green. So I'd just like to ask, if it's to move it, but ask about the item in relation to the Machinery Preservation Society. Would that be appropriate?
Yes, we'll take your question. What's your question, councillor?
Referring to the bottom of page 274, that's where that item starts, and it's in relation to the lease of the building used by the Machinery Preservation Society. And running on to page 275, we see that back in April, we were awaiting signing of a lease. So has council signed that lease now?
Mr. GM, isn't it chronological? Yeah, can you explain that, Mr. GM?
Final is supposed to do it.
Yeah, we won't, councillor, thanks councillor Nolan. We, no, I haven't signed it as yet. And the Mayor and I haven't signed it. We sign it up, we send it out to the, in this case, the association for their signature, then it comes back and the Mayor and I endorse it under the seal of council. Well, it could be signed. We haven't signed it. We're waiting on it to come back signed, and then we sign it and seal it.
Okay, I was advised by the Machinery Preservation Society that they signed that lease on the 12th of May, and we're awaiting your signature. Thank you, Mr. GM.
Thank you. We'll follow that up. Thank you, councillor. Councillor Clark.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Did you have anything to say?
No, sorry. I was seconding something.
Someone was quick. I did check that time with the GM to back me up. So, okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll put this, all those in favour. Declared that carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We move to item 12, committee report. Report number 1, 70/20, the minutes of the BIU Band Hall, page 288. Councillor Cool is moving that way. Seconder, Councillor Clark. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Cool, did you want to speak to the motion?
No, just again, a very industrious little committee carrying on with the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's no further debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour and against? All those in favour? Thank you. That's declared carried unanimously.
Councillor Page?
Yeah. We move to item 13, questions taken on notice from the previous council meeting.
The answers provided.
The answers are provided.
No, there wasn't any.
There wasn't any. Okay, thank you, councillors, for which there is nil. Questions for next meeting arising from items on the agenda. Is there any questions from Councillor Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question I have is the local government circulars have been released that council meetings can now continue back to face-to-face. When can our council expect to go back to face-to-face meetings?
Yeah, good question, councillor. I think at the moment we still have orders that some of our councillors should not be out in, they're of a certain age. And we don't have the Zoom facilities at the chambers at this stage. Mr. GM, did you want to add comment?
Only to say, Madam Mayor, exactly that. There's, ultimately it's a decision for the council about when that will happen. But yeah, we're certainly not set up for Zoom meetings in the council chamber.
Yeah. So can I say that we'll do some investigation. We'll take your question on notice, Councillor Kennedy, and do some investigation. I think the sooner we're back together, the better. But we do also still have the requirement of the Office of Local Government about limitations there, how many can be there, and also about staff. So we'll take that on notice. Thanks for that. Any further questions? No? Okay, we'll take that question on notice. Thank you, councillors. We move to confidential. The first item is the confidential minutes of the ordinary meeting. Oh, well, yeah, okay. We'll move, I need a mover, moved by Councillor Clark, second by Councillor Nolan, to move in camera. Councillor, is there any discussion? I'll ask all those in favour. And against? Councillor Brown, you haven't voted, and Councillor Allgate hasn't voted. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. We'll move in camera. I'll hand over to the General Manager to read the motions passed during the meeting. I should read your one.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's a confidential minutes.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. Item number 1, Madam Mayor, the confidential minutes for confirmation, and that just that the confidential minutes of the council meeting held 29 April 2020 be confirmed.
Oh, item 1 is the Merrill Minute number 8/20 dated May 8, that the Merrill Minute number 8/20 dated May 8, 2020 be received, that council note the correspondence dated 1st of May 2020 from the General Manager, Mr. James Roncon, seeking a renewal of appointment as General Manager of the Broken Hill City Council, that in accordance with clause 5.2 of the General Manager's employment contract, council offer Mr. James Roncon a further 5-year contract, that the Mayor be authorised in consultation with Mark Anderson of Local Government Management Solution and the review panel to commence negotiations of a new contract and report back to council.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The minutes, get those motions.
This is the notice of motion.
Yeah, that wasn't it though. That wasn't what was passed. It was Councillor Brown's notice.
Madam Mayor, the motions for which notice has been given be received, and that the Broken Hill City Council prepare a breakdown of expenditure of all legal fees relating to the Civic Centre redevelopment. The next item was a tender for hailstorm damaged structures for the Broken Hill City Council, tender T189. Resolved by Council that the Broken Hill City Council report number 7120 dated April 15, 2020 be received, and number 2 that Council award tender T189 for repairs to hailstorm damaged structures to Joss Facilities Management Proprietary Limited for the tendered amount of $2,995,127, including GST. Item number 4, Madam Mayor, another tender for air conditioning controls and minor upgrade works in the Administrative Centre and Civic Centre. The Broken Hill City Council report 7220 dated April 19 be received, and that Council award the tender to Devlees Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Proprietary Limited for the tendered amount of $425,171.45, including GST, for air conditioning controls and minor upgrade works at Council's Administrative Centre, Civic Centre and Library. And the last, Madam Mayor, correspondence report request for financial assistance, Regional Express. Resolved by Council of the Broken Hill City Council report 7320 dated May 20 be received. 2, the Council rescind minute number 46228 of 25 March 2020 and minute number 46250 of 29 April 2020. And number 3, that Council support the revised request for financial assistance from Regional Express Holdings Limited, noting the reinstatement of the original head tax fee per passenger as where the Broken Hill City Council Regional Express Holdings Limited current partnership agreement, and to grant a one-off credit note of $48,400 for the 2021 year to be offset against future invoices. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. With that, I'll close the meeting and thank you for your patience tonight.